One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Okay, here is the dealio. I looked up that term just before I started recording. I was like, where does that come from? Like and I don't often say that. Obviously, I was just saying it to be funny at the beginning. Here's the dealio. I have no idea where that comes from. So of course, I go over to handy dandy Google to see. And it said it was made popular in a Missy Elliott song. And I'm like, really? Like she was the first one to say, what's the dealio? Like no one before that. And then of course it had like Gru from Despicable Me and Michael Scott from The Office, who, fun fact, if you didn't know that, is the same person. It's Gru is Steve Carell. Michael Scott is Steve Carell. Anyway, this is not about like pop culture stuff today, but what is the dealio with people being lazy with titling their content, naming their content, figuring out what they are going to name their stuff? Because I'm frustrated. I'm real frustrated with looking at how many unoriginal ideas are out there, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? I was really trying to figure out how to talk about today's topic without blatantly calling out shows that are doing the thing that are annoying me, right? Because I don't like to throw people under the bus. I don't like to say, hey, you, and like point my finger right in their face and say, stop it. You are not behaving the way that you're supposed to be behaving. because then I have my mom hat on, right? Like then I'm parenting. I don't want to parent content creators. I don't want to tell you are doing things wrong because there's no content creation jail. I guess there is if you get slapped with like a cease and desist, right? From copying someone else's work. But it just frustrates me so much. And I have been checking out some new shows that have been recommended to me. And I'll go into, you probably know this if you've been listening to the podcast, but I listen to all of my podcasts on Good Pods. So you can go download Good Pods, come follow me. It's like the Goodreads of podcasting, and I rate episodes. I will drop little nuggets in there if I'm like, hey, you should go listen to this. There's a few in particular that I'm obsessed with lately. I love comedy podcasts. I love show podcasts like Yellowstone and the new Sex and the Shiitake. Yeah, I don't want to say that. The Sex and the City show, Just Like That. And Just Like That is officially what it's called. But and of course, Office Ladies, like there's so many shows that I listen to that are centered around television or movies. And then I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts and online business marketing. Like it's just a whole array of, it's all over the place. But I was on there looking for a particular episode. And of course, you go to the search bar and I'm typing in what I want to find. And the amount of lookalikes, copycats, the ones that are just trying to be just like the one that's very popular, it was ridiculous. Okay. I'm pointing my finger. I'm wagging my finger so much in today's episode because it's frustrating. People are being lazy with titling either their entire podcast or the title of each individual episode. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because at a first glance, it's really not that big of a deal, right? You're like, Crystal, calm down. Like they didn't take their name. Like it's not trademarked or it's not copyright. Like whatever. Okay, like it's so far beyond that, because what I find is frustrating is if I go to all my hard work of creating a piece of content, and let's imagine that something goes viral. And then that's when you'll see copycats of that exact same piece of content, like they're just trying to piggyback off of it. It's like the idea of someone that gets famous and then all of a sudden all their second 20 teen cousins come out and they're just like, oh, you got money now. Like, you remember when you owed me $200 from back in the day? Well, actually, we've added interest to that. Now it's going to be, they're just trying to get money. They're trying to suck the life out of everything that you have worked so hard to achieve. That's how I feel when someone's just trying to copycat someone else's content. That's really what it feels like. And it pisses me off. Ooh, let's just throw that out there. It pisses me off when I see it, because I know how hard y'all are working. I know how hard content creators are working. So this episode today is basically me just coming here and reminding you, or letting you know, if you never knew that this was a thing, that it is something that is really frustrating for content creators, but also it's something for those of you that are brand new that I want you to avoid. Because I have seen, especially on YouTube, there have been, I don't want to say like it's bad information or misinformation. I don't really know what you would categorize it as, but it is a strategy to grow your channel by siphoning off of someone else's success. Well, that's like the best way. Okay, look, for anybody that doesn't know what siphoning is, maybe I shouldn't know this. I grew up in a small town. There are a lot of crazy things that happen. I personally never did this. I think it's illegal, but you would go and you would siphon gas out of someone else's gas tank. You would put, I don't even know, like a special hose. I think I've seen this done with a water hose. But basically you take it from one tank of a car and you put it into another tank of a car with, I don't even actually know how it all works, but you're sucking the life out of someone else's content and you're trying to say, oh, this was my original idea, or this is exactly what I created, blah, blah, blah. And I see this in other facets of online business too, where someone will take a course and they basically regurgitate everything that they learned into their own program and they try to sell it as like, oh, these are all of my original ideas. Like, pay me thousands of dollars because I thought of this all on my own. I see it a lot. I see it a lot more than it should be happening. And you're siphoning off of someone else's success. And again, it may not seem like it's that big of a deal when it comes to, your episode titles or things like that. But all I'm trying to remind you of today is to be original, because it just turns into clickbait. That's really what it feels like. It feels like it's the equivalent of having clickbait on like a blog article or a social media post or something that's misleading people. It's like the knockoff version of, I can't even think. I'm thinking of all kinds of knockoff. The first thing that comes to mind is food. It's not really the knockoff. It's like the generic version of something you really, really love, right? It's like the, oh my gosh, y'all. Speaking of comedy podcast, I think about Jim Gaffigan has this great skit when he talks about cereal. How it's like you have like the name brand cereal is in these, beautiful boxes that have probably spent thousands of dollars getting it designed and everything else. And then he talks about the generic is in a bag. Like, it's just in a sad bag, basically almost on the floor because it gets the bottom shelf in the grocery store. And that's like, oh, I don't even know where I'm going with the name brand and generic comparison, but it's so frustrating to see someone that works really hard to create a piece of content and other people just come in and they copycat it and they just can't think of an original idea on their own. So I didn't want this episode to be just a full rant of me talking about my own issues that I have with content creation and the things that are wrong. So what can we do about this, right? As content creators, as maybe you're inspired by a mentor of yours or someone that you've really looked up to. And what is it? It's like imitation is the highest form of flattery. I may have just totally butchered that quote. I don't know where it comes from, but I've heard it over and over and over again because I've been in the creative space for a long time. If you didn't know this, I've been a writer, I've been a blogger, I have been doing a lot of things creatively for a while, and I've followed lots of people, lots and lots of people. I've followed movie directors, I've followed authors, I don't follow singers because that's not my jam, but I do follow people that are songwriters. And so collectively, I could say a lot of the information that I have learned over the years it's not my own. Like I try not to teach things that aren't from my own experience. So this is really what I want to hone in on is what you hear me say on this podcast, what you hear me say in, my YouTube videos and my newsletters. I try to bring in my own experience into the content because then it's mine. It is my own experience. It's part of my journey. People could sit here all day and talk about being a parent and being a content creator. That's pretty generic. But whenever I come to you and say, oh, I am a mom of 3 boys, they are 12, 9, and 6, like it gets a lot more like, oh, that's a lot more specific. We live outside of Houston, Texas. Okay, that's getting even more specific. I could go on and on about the dynamics of who I am as a person. And that is what molds and shapes your content. So don't try to just look at what is already successful out in the world. I mean, I think that's great to follow people's blueprints and maybe even some of the templates that they use to create their content, but you've got to find the ways that you are uniquely you. I've told you a few things about me today, I'm obsessed with comedy podcast. I love the new And Just Like That show. I love Yellowstone. I've been listening to that podcast as well. Office Ladies. I could talk about my basically it's an obsession with watching Friends and Schitt's Creek. I love copy. That's not the right word. Coffee. Okay. Obviously, I guess I haven't had enough today. I love coffee. I love the intricacies. This is where I'm going to take it a step. Like, you're going to really get to know me in this episode. I love the different kinds of coffee that you can make. And I did not realize this was a weird thing until I started talking to my mom about it. Because I was thinking like, oh, everybody just knows this about coffee. Nope. Most people know just a pour, not even a pour over. That's even getting fancy, but just drip coffee, right? Either at a coffee maker or a K-cup. That's typically where people stop. It's like, oh, that's coffee. I started getting into pour overs and lattes, Americanos, espressos, a breve latte, I could just go on and on about all these different things that I've learned because I'm obsessed. I love coffee so, so much. This is unique to my personality. When people start getting into this, like, oh, I need to share more of myself, because you'll hear me say that, like, share more of who you are in your content, people get very uncomfortable because they think that I'm telling them, you got to share your social security number, where you grew up, what street you live on, how old your kids are, what their names are, how long you've been married, like all these intimate details of your life. And that's not what it's about at all. I have shared things here with you today, and I've not once gave away something that would be threatening to my existence. This is just who I am. This is what I enjoy. I've talked, about my kids, about my life, about my husband and I. We've been married for 10 years. That doesn't throw anything out there that's like, oh my gosh, don't do that. But it's relatable. It helps you as a listener, you as someone that is part of our community, get to know me better. And I am challenging you in this episode today to get out of your comfort zone of keeping everything so black and white, where it's just all instructional. You're just like, okay, maybe you are you have a business and you are a consultant where you teach people things. I love this, y'all. I love this. I've talked about how to start a podcast. There are so many things of this podcast that are how to. I love a how-to episode. But if you are just hitting record and spitting off, here's the 5 ways to do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The end. See you next week. It's boring. It's so stinking boring. And I want you to pull out the pieces of who you are and share it in your content, because that will be what helps you stand out. Because maybe you've been doing the clickbaity things. You didn't know any better. That's okay. After today, you don't have that excuse. You know better now, okay? I have wagged my finger at you. You know better. We've been reprimanded, however you want to look at it. Just know that that's not okay, but we can fix it. It's not the end of the world if this is something that you've been doing. What I'm going to encourage you to do is think of ways that you can pull out your personality and let that shine in your content. Whether it's your podcast, whether you're starting to do YouTube too, whether you want to stand out on social media, in your email list, whatever it may be. I think it's really important that you try this work. It's time consuming. I'm not going to say it's not, to figure out, well, what do I share about my life? Where are the little things that I can be more of myself? It is going to take time. It's going to take practice. It's going to take lots of practice. When people ask me about my newsletter, they're like, how do you think of these stories to write on your newsletter? I'm like, I've been writing my newsletter since 2017. Yeah, I've been doing it since 2017. I've been writing emails for 5 years to an audience of people that I'm like, okay, what would they want to hear about? That is at least once a week for 5 years. That is a lot. And that has been really how I've honed and crafted what I want people to do. Y'all, this is such a true story. I recently sent out, this has been a few weeks now, an email, my Friday newsletter. If you're not on there, if you go to the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 328, you go all the way to the bottom. There's a way for you to join our newsletter if you're not on there. And I sent out one where I said, which one do you prefer? Which version of Brad Pitt do you like? Is it Legends of the Fall or is it Fight Club Brad Pitt? And I got so many people emailing me back like, oh my gosh, this one, I'm not going to call her out by name, but it was so funny because she said, I'm blushing and drooling at my desk right now. My husband's going to ask what I'm drooling over because I'd put 2 GIFs in the email of Brad Pitt. Tristan from Legends of the Fall and the Fight Club version of Brad Pitt. And I was like, these are 2 movies that I genuinely love. I love Brad Pitt too. Like, by the way, like super, we were just talking yesterday, World War Z is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love this movie so much. But it's like, that's what I do. I share stories like that. You're getting to know me by sharing. I love Brad Pitt. I love Legends of the Fall. I could do a whole podcast episode about how much I love that movie so much. And then it's like these little, I love Fight Club too. So it's my personality. It's me sharing with you little details about my life that bring you into my world, but I'm not exposing myself to you hacking into my computer and knowing all the intimate details of my life or, chasing my kids down at school or anything like that. I think these are all the mental things that we think about whenever we start putting ourselves out there as creators. We get a little nervous about like how much to share, how much to not share. But it's the thing that helps you stand out when you pull out the pieces of your personality that you can share with other people. So let's do a quick wrap up of today's episode. First and foremost, don't be lazy and copycat what other people are doing. You can absolutely find ways to be original. And that's number 2, to pull out pieces of your personality and add it into your content. And that actually just reminded me of the conversation I had with Zafira Rajan. We talked about emails and, just really pulling out pieces of who you are and sharing it in your content. So I'm going to link to that episode in the show notes because it was really good. And she shared some other great examples of her own life. And I think that's really fitting for today's episode. So I'm going to have that linked in the show notes. Go to crystalprofit.com/episode 328 to check that out. But that's all I have for you today. I'm so happy that we were able to turn this around. I was like, oh, I don't want this episode to be so ranty, but I said what I said. It's out there. And yes, don't copy, don't be lazy. Be yourself because you are so special with what you have to share and the important message that you have. You just need to pull out those pieces of your personality that are going to make it shine. So that's all I have for you today. Again, the show notes are crystalprofit.com/episode 328. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.